Have you ever opened your door to a stranger in the middle of a storm and felt, in the same breath, fear and a quiet certainty that it was the right thing to do? I keep thinking about that question whenever I remember Cedar Hollow, the night the sky turned white and the wind learned to howl. The snow came down like a curtain that wouldn't lift. It erased sidewalks and fences, swallowed cars, and made the old sycamores bow as if the town itself were praying. In a little blue house with a stubborn chimney and curtains stitched with tiny daisies, Lillian Carter listened to the wind comb through the eaves and refused to be afraid. She had made a habit of refusing fear. When you're 74, a widow, and the last light on your block during a blackout, you learn which noises matter. The kettle's sigh mattered. The wood stove's crackle mattered. The rest was weather and memory taking turns. Lillian's fingers moved like a metronome over yarn the color of cinnamon bark. The blanket in her lap had grown long enough to spill onto the braided rug, and the scent of orange peel and cloves simmered from a small pot on the stove. On the mantel, a framed photograph watched her with that smile she still answered out loud sometimes. Harold Carter, navy blues, a jaw made for promises. He had been gone 11 winters, and yet he belonged to this room the way heat belongs to fire. Across the room, Booker, half terrier, half mystery, all attitude, lifted his head when the house sighed. He was old now, muzzle powdered with white, but his ears still worked like antennae searching the air for meaning. When the first knock came, 3 quick raps stitched with urgency, Booker was on his paws before the second. Knocks in a storm carry their own grammar. These were not the uncertain knuckles of a salesperson or the polite tapping of the church ladies with leftover pies. These were the knocks of someone who needed warmth before words. Lillian put down her needles. The wind pressed its cold face to the windows. She slid back the chain, turned the latch, and opened the door to a world made of moving white. On the porch stood a man with snow in his eyebrows and apology in his eyes, his arms cradling a boy wrapped in blankets so tight he looked like a cocoon. Beside him, a woman in a knitted beanie held a teenage girl close. The girl's cheeks were cherry red. Her gaze flicked from the dog to the stove to the old quilt on the couch in quick, hungry glances. The man tried to make words appear in the steam of his breath. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. Power's out on Maple and Birch. Our boy, Noah, he's burning up. We saw your light. I didn't know where else to." "Inside," Lillian said. "There are times to deliberate and times to move. Bring him straight to the stove. Shoes off on the mat, please. Wet socks will finish what the cold started." The woman's eyes shone with relief that looked almost like tears. "Thank you, ma'am. I'm Grace. This is my husband, Daniel, and our daughter, Ellie. We're the Whitakers. We're right across the street. We just moved in last month." "I'm Lillian," she said, "and this rascal is Booker. Don't let him fool you. He's protective, not mean." Grace let out a breath that sounded like a prayer. Daniel eased Noah onto the couch near the stove, his big hands surprisingly gentle as he unwrapped the blankets. The boy's face was too bright, the kind of pink you don't want to see on a child in winter. His hair stuck to his forehead in damp curls. Ellie hovered with a pack of tissues, trying to be helpful in the way teenagers try to be older than they are when fear makes the room smaller. Lillian moved like a woman who'd been preparing for this night all her life. She set a kettle to boil, added a pinch of salt to warm water for a cloth, and checked the stove's air vent with a practiced hand. "Fevers are stubborn," she murmured, half to Noah, half to memory. "But so am I." She glanced at Grace. "How long has he been like this?" "Started this afternoon," Grace said, voice trembling and steady all at once. "We thought it was just a little cold. Then the lights went out and he started shivering and burning up at the same time. The roads look... We couldn't drive him anywhere." "That road would swallow you whole tonight," Lillian said gently. "We'll bring the fever down and keep him warm. If he worsens, I know a paramedic 2 streets over who keeps a radio for nights like this." I have to admit, watching Lillian then, I felt that particular kind of awe we reserve for elders who are unhurried in crisis. There's a rhythm to competence that calms everyone else's panic. If you've been lucky enough to witness it, you know. She dampened a cloth and laid it across Noah's forehead, then slipped another warm cloth over his wrists. "Hands and feet," she explained to Ellie, who watched as if she could memorize her way into bravery. They help tell the fever where to go. She turned to Grace. He'll need sips, not gulps. I've got peppermint and chamomile, and there are biscuits in the tin if anyone remembers how to chew. Chamomile, Grace said, almost laughing because tears and laughter live closer than we think. And I'll try a biscuit. Daniel stood still, as if any movement might break the fragile safety forming in the room. He looked at the framed photo over the mantel, at the hand-stitched sampler that said, "Love is a verb," at the yellowed newspaper clipping pinned to a corkboard that read, "Local choir wins state." He noticed everything and said almost nothing, because gratitude is also a quiet thing. "Your house," he began, and then found the words he wanted. "It feels like a place that knows how to hold people." "It's had practice," Lillian said, pouring tea, the steam curling like scripture. "When Harold shipped out, neighbors took turns sitting right there where you're standing now. When he didn't ship back, they sat there again. Holding is what made it possible to keep breathing." Silence settled for a moment, the kind that isn't empty, but full. Outside, the wind tested the seams of the house. Inside, the stove answered with a low, persistent roar, and Booker lay at Noah's feet like an old knight beside a small king. "Miss Lillian," Ellie said, trying out the honorific with care, "that blanket you're knitting, it's beautiful." "It's for someone who needs it," Lillian said. "Tonight, that might be all of you." Grace pressed the warm mug to her lips and inhaled like she'd never tasted safety before. "We shouldn't impose." "Hush," Lillian said, not unkindly. "Kindness only works if somebody lets it in." There is a funny thing that happens when strangers stop being strangers. The details arrive first. The way Daniel pushed his sleeves to the elbow and kept them there, as if readiness could be a posture. The way Grace tucked strands of hair behind her ear whenever she was thinking. The way Ellie, despite trying for composure, laughed with her whole face when Booker sneezed theatrically, as if the dog were trying to lighten the mood. And then the stories, small ones at first, slipped between spoon clinks and stove crackles like soft thread through fabric. "We're from Bloomington," Grace said. "Daniel's work transferred him. Everything's still in boxes. Noah got a cold the first week, but it passed. He never had a fever like this." "New houses take time to learn you," Lillian said. "This old one knew I liked the kettle to sing before dawn, before I could admit mornings had become the loneliest part." Daniel looked down. "I'm sorry about your husband." "Thank you," she said simply, and that was enough. Noah stirred then, eyelids fluttering. Lillian touched his brow. "Coming down a touch," she murmured. Grace's shoulders loosened. Ellie exhaled. Daniel's hands fell from fists into open palms. As the night deepened, the Whitakers' story unwound. The move, the new school, Ellie's calculus teacher who used sarcasm like punctuation, the way Noah named every snowplow he saw like a kid naming constellations. Lillian offered her own tales in return. The music ministry she'd led at New Bethel Church for 31 years, the garden that refused to give up on tomatoes, and the day last fall when the mailbox started bringing more offers to buy her house than birthday cards. "They want to turn this into rentals," she said, not angry, just tired. "Said I'd be happier in a condo with an elevator and a gym. I told them my gym is splitting oak and my elevator is my knees." Ellie grinned. Daniel chuckled. Grace gripped Noah's hand, and I swear you could see the blueprint of a community start sketching itself under the roof beams. It's worth saying, because some people will only hear elderly black woman and white family and think they know the plot, that the tenderness passing between them did not erase history or weather or the practical distance between their lives. It simply did what tenderness does. It made room. That's the miracle I keep coming back to. Not the storm or even the survival of it, but the fact that in a small living room with one old stove, Difference sat down and warmed its hands like everybody else. Around midnight, the wind dropped from a scream to a growl. The kettle sang again. Lillian doled out half a biscuit to Booker for being civilized company and another to Ellie for the same. Grace nodded off in a chair, Noah asleep with cheeks less fever bright. Daniel insistently insisting he would take the floor by the door to keep the drafts from reaching his family. Lillian tried to argue. Daniel shook his head. "I've got it," he said. "You've done enough." "Kindness doesn't keep ledgers," she said, but she gave him a pillow anyway. At 1 in the morning, the power teased the block. the faint electric hum, a flash of street light, then went out again. At 2, the storm remembered how to rage. At 3, a sound like a shotgun crack announced a branch giving up under the weight of ice. Lillian lay on the couch across from Noah, blanket up to her chin, eyes open in the iron-dark room. She listened to the strange orchestra of sleeping humans. She let her mind walk through the years like rooms. She prayed the prayer she had learned to pray when the future was unknowable. Tomorrow just enough. What happened next is what a storm is for in a story. It makes confession easier. It takes away the lights so we will look at each other. At 3:17, Ellie's whisper found the dark. "Miss Lillian, can I ask you something weird?" "You can ask me something honest," Lillian said. "Weird is just honest with better shoes." Ellie laughed softly. "I don't know how to make friends here. Everyone already has a place. I feel like the extra chair nobody knows where to put." "Put yourself by the stove," Lillian said. "People gather around warmth." Ellie was quiet then. "How do you not get mad at the world? With everything. The way folks look at you sometimes. The way they treat older people. Black people. Just people." "Who says I don't get mad?" Lillian said. "I get mad, baby. I just try not to let anger be the only song I sing. Harold used to say anger is a match, useful for lighting the fire that keeps you alive, dangerous if you try to eat it." "I like that," Ellie whispered. "Anger as a match." "Gentleness is a match too," Lillian said. "So is showing up." I found myself nodding alone in my own room as I typed those words later. There's a reason some sentences feel like they were waiting for you. At 4, the world started remembering it had a horizon. The storm shaved its voice down to a rasp. At 5, the first plow carved a corridor down Cedar Street, throwing up walls of white as tall as a man. At 6, a thin blue light lit the snow from within, and the Whitakers woke into the kind of silence that follows endurance. Noah's fever had slipped a rung. Grace kissed his forehead like somebody returning from a war. Daniel stood at the window, hand on the frame as if steadying the house itself. Ellie fed Booker the last corner of her biscuit and received a dignified nod in return. They cleaned up the night the way people clean up after a good cry, quietly and with gratitude. Daniel shoveled the walk. Grace washed the mugs. Ellie folded the Afghan Lillian had draped over Noah and arranged it like a flag across the back of the couch. The power, as if it too had needed a nap, blinked back on 2 blocks away, and then here, bringing with it the refrigerator's hum and the baseboard's small clicks, and the reminder that the modern world still existed. "You saved my son," Grace said simply, standing in the doorway with snowflakes in her eyelashes. "There aren't words big enough." "Your boy saved himself," Lillian said. "You just needed a warm place to remember how to help him do it." She put a small bottle of honey in Grace's hand. "For his tea, raw from my neighbor's bees. Tell Noah it's medicine that tastes like summer." Daniel cleared his throat. "When the roads are clear, I'm coming back to shovel that whole side yard for you. And I'm fixing that sag on your porch step before someone else does." "You are not doing my honey-do list," Lillian said, smiling. "You are bringing that laugh of yours and letting this house hear it again." They left finally, because mourning requires people to trust that they can carry the night's kindness into daylight. Lillian stood on the porch, the cold gnawing her fingertips, and watched them cross the street. Daniel's arm around Grace's shoulders. Ellie hopping in footsteps to keep her boots from sinking. Noah's hat pulled low. Booker barking once as if to say, "Don't forget me now." In the hush that followed, the house felt big again, the way rooms swell when they are slowly exhaling human presence. Lillian closed the door, set the kettle, and sat down. She picked up her knitting and began, patient as snowfall, to add length to the blanket that had warmed strangers, and now felt like it belonged to them too. That should have been the end of the night's story. Another storm survived, another notch on Cedar Hollow's weathered belt. But sometimes kindness ripples in ways we cannot measure yet. Sometimes it calls echoes out of rooms we thought were finished singing. Because later that afternoon, as the sky brightened to the color of milk and the plows finished their work and neighbors began their post-storm wandering from porch to porch, a black SUV turned onto Cedar Street and stopped in front of the little blue house. Lillian's heart missed a beat, then found it again. The door opened. A man stepped out whose shadow fit the threshold like a memory. He was taller than his father had been, face cut with city angles, coat more expensive than the shingles on a roof. Marcus Carter, her only son, away for years, stepped into the snow with a woman at his side whose eyes never quite warmed. "Ma," Marcus said, his voice deep and hesitant, like a hymn sung by someone who forgot the words halfway through. "We came as soon as we could. You shouldn't have to weather storms alone." Booker barked once and then went quiet. Lillian stood very still. The house, which had held everyone so easily last night, seemed to hold its breath. "I wish I could tell you that everything softened right there on the porch. That is not how most stories that matter go. Marcus's return would be a gift and a test, a balm and a blade. But that is chapter two's work. For now, what you should know is this. The door that opened in the storm stayed open in Lillian's heart when the snow stopped. And for reasons none of them could guess yet, that one open door would change the shape of three families' lives. Daniel noticed the rearranged furniture, the missing photographs from the mantel. "Place looks different," he said. "Somebody's idea of improvement," Lillian replied quietly. They sat together for half an hour, sharing small stories, trying to pretend the air wasn't tense. When they left, Grace hugged Lillian a little longer than usual. "If you need anything, you call us, day or night." "I know," Lillian said, "and I believe you." That night the argument began. Marcus had noticed the Whitakers' visit. "Ma, you can't just have people over without telling us. What if you're too tired to deal with company?" "They're not company," Lillian said. "They're friends." Vanessa appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "Friends or not, it's disruptive. You need rest." "What I need," Lillian said, "is to feel like this is still my home." For the first time, Marcus raised his voice. "We're trying to help you, Ma." "Then listen to me," she shot back. "Help isn't taking over. Help is standing beside." It might have ended there, a clash of pride and worry. But the next morning, Lillian's cough worsened. She grew dizzy while tending the stove and had to sit down before she fell. Vanessa found her slumped in the chair, cheeks pale, and instead of calling for help, she muttered, "This is exactly what I've been talking about." Marcus, hearing the commotion, rushed in. "Ma, we're calling a doctor." But Lillian shook her head. "Not yet. I just need—" Her voice broke into a fit of coughing, and this time she couldn't wave it off. She didn't see Vanessa's eyes roll, but she felt it, the cold dismissal that hurt more than the sickness. When the Whitakers heard what happened, they didn't knock. They walked straight in, Daniel scooping Lillian's frail frame into his arms, while Grace wrapped a blanket around her. Vanessa protested, but Grace's voice cut sharp and clean. "She's coming with us!" And just like that, Lillian left her own house for the first time in years, without knowing if she'd be coming back. The Whitakers' living room smelled like rosemary bread and cedarwood. They set Lillian on the couch near their own stove, covering her with quilts until the chill in her bones began to loosen. Grace made tea. Daniel called their family doctor, who promised to stop by. "I'm sorry," Lillian whispered. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "You didn't," Grace said. "You revealed it." When Marcus arrived an hour later, his face was tight with confusion and anger. Vanessa followed, her expression carefully arranged into concern. "What happened?" Marcus asked. Daniel stood. "She collapsed, and your wife did nothing." "That's not true," Vanessa snapped. But before she could finish, Ellie stepped forward, holding her small camera. "You should see this." The footage was damning. Vanessa's cold words, the way she stood by while Lillian struggled, the disdain in her tone when speaking about the house and the town. And then, the moment that froze Marcus in place. Lillian slipping from her chair, hitting the floor, and Vanessa not moving to help. The silence after the clip ended was heavy. Marcus's jaw worked, but no words came. Vanessa tried to protest, but Marcus finally looked at her, really looked, and said, "Pack your things." She stared at him, incredulous. "Marcus!" "Go," he said, voice breaking but firm. She left without another word, the slam of the door echoing like a gunshot. Marcus turned to his mother. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have been here. I should have seen." Lillian reached for his hand. You're here now. For the next week, Marcus stayed. He chopped wood. He made her tea. He listened, really listened, as she told stories about Harold, about the neighbors, about the way this house had kept her warm long before stoves and sweaters. One afternoon, she handed him the brass key to the front door. I'm ready, she said. Ready for what? He asked. To come with you, she replied. But only if this house stays what it's always been, a place where kindness lives. Marcus promised, and he kept it. The Whitakers moved into the little blue house a month later. The wood stove still roared, Booker still guarded the hearth, and the door stayed open for anyone who needed warmth on a cold night. Lillian visited often, sitting in her old chair, knitting blankets for whoever the next storm would bring. If you'd asked her, she'd tell you the snowstorm changed everything. But really, it was the knock on the door and the choice to open it that rewrote the rest of her life.